Hi, I'm Dalton Hall, and the disease we were given to research was the polio virus. Polio. Etiology for the polio virus, because it is a virus and not a bacteria, is that of a human enterovirus composed of RNA and a protein capsid. The polio genome contains a single strand of RNA. Poliovirus has a capsid morphology and has an isohedral symmetry, and it is non-enveloped as well. You can see in the bottom right hand corner of the screen a picture depicting that the attachment of the poliovirus to the nerve cell is what causes the disease. Polio can also be called poliomyelitis or infantile paralysis. In about 0.5% of cases, there is muscle weakness that results in an inability to move. The reservoir for the poliovirus are humans, and we are the only known reservoir for the poliovirus, making vaccines highly effective in interrupting virus transmission and stopping it as an endemic. In very rare cases, higher primates may also be infected. Due to the efforts of many countries, there are very few places in which polio is still an endemic. If you look at the picture in the top right, you can see that only countries as of 2015 where polio is still an endemic are very few and concentrated around the Middle East. More specifically, to be aware of is that polio resides in human fecal matter, making anything contaminated with this a high risk for contracting the polio virus. Moving on to cover the signs and symptoms, I found that it is a strange fact that the vast majority of people who are infected with polio don't ever become sick and are not even aware that they have been infected at one point or another. An interesting number of note is that about 72 out of 100 people infected will have no visible signs nor symptoms. And of those who do, about 1 in 4 will have flu-like signs and symptoms. Polio has two varieties, paralytic and non-paralytic, with paralytic being far more rare and having a variety of types. Now, of these two varieties, we will start off by discussing non-paralytic polio. Signs and symptoms non-paralytic. Non-paralytic polio usually lasts for about 1 to 10 days, with some symptoms being fever, sore throat, headache, fatigue, back and neck pain, stiffness, and pain in the arms or legs. Signs may be vomiting, muscle weakness, and meningitis. Moving on to the signs and symptoms of paralytic polio, paralysis can occur in 1 in 200 people infected. Now, the next signs are specific only to paralytic polio and are separate from non-paralytic. The signs for non-paralytic polio include a loss of reflexes and loose or floppy limbs. The symptoms specific to paralytic polio are severe muscle aches or weaknesses, as opposed to non-paralytic version, which is not nearly as severe or incapacitating. Sadly, between 2 to 10 of 100 people who have paralysis from polio will end up dying because the virus affects the muscles that help them breathe, resulting in improper function that leads to asphyxiation and death. Interestingly enough, I discovered through my research that it is possible to be affected by post-polio syndrome. Now, in those who survive through polio and who have fully recovered, they can in fact develop new muscle pain, weakness, or paralysis 15 to 40 years later. This is most often noticed in those who contract the disease as children and experience it later as adults, because generally those who contract the virus as adults pass on before it would become to fruition. The signs and symptoms of post-polio syndrome include a few things in congruence with the initial attack, as well as some new onsets as well. Under the signs section, we see that muscle atrophy, breathing or swallowing problems, and sleep-related breathing disorders all can arise during post-polio syndrome. Under the symptoms section, we can see that muscle or joint weakness and pain, fatigue/exhaustion after minimal activity, decreased tolerance of cold temperatures, and cognitive problems, as well as depression and mood swings, all have been reported symptoms of those affected by this syndrome. I found it interesting that as time went on, the disease was able to move from something purely physical in nature, such as muscle weakness, and expand its reach into the emotional realm through depression and mood swings. Next, we will have Hayden's portion of the presentation for you to enjoy.
All right, hey guys, my name is Hayden Lean, and these are my slides on polio. So I'm going to screen share here really quick. All right, here we go. So I'm going to start off with some basic history about polio. But so polio is actually not a new virus by any means. It has existed for thousands of years, and as you can see on the picture on the right, there are even ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs showing the disease and how it affected people. You can see that the person's right leg is smaller, and it looks very hard to use, and that is definitely what polio is. So thankfully, though, in the last few hundred years, with the advances of technology and medicine, we have been able to discover what this disease actually is and how it can be treated, and what to do to prevent further spread of this disease. So in 1789, the first clinical description of polio was provided by Michael Underwood, and in the 1800s, it was finally given a name, which was the Hindmeden disease. But in the 1950s, the United States actually had its worst outbreak in history, but thankfully, from developed vaccines and administration, it was eliminated from most of the Western Hemisphere. Hide this here really quick. So the transmission of polio, it can be spread in many ways, but it is mostly spread through feces to oral transmission and oral to oral transmission from an infected person. And as you can see on the right, I used the different emoji so you guys wouldn't forget how this specific disease is transmitted. So with treatment, unfortunately, there are no cures for polio, but there are things that can be done to help alleviate symptoms when the polio virus runs its course. Treatment are using heating pads to help alleviate the muscle spasms that happen, like Dalton mentioned earlier. Also, painkillers and antibiotics can be given to help the body. Physical therapy, along with braces, can help the body become stronger and even more stable. And lastly, orthopedic surgery can be effective to help the muscles recover from their strength and function. And like it mentions at the bottom of these treatments, they can only help, but they do not reverse permanent damage done. So with prevention and control, simply put, polio can be prevented by maintaining high levels of polio immunization in the community. And although polio cases are very little in the United States, it is still recommended to receive the vaccine. And the vaccines should be taken at ages 2, 4, and twice before entering elementary school. So there are two types of vaccines, and these vaccines are the IPV and the OPV. The IPV is the inactivated form, and the OPV is the oral form. And both are extremely safe to use. And these vaccines are even good for people with HIV and AIDS, and even for pregnant women. And this has eliminated most of the polio virus from all over the world, and they're both seen as both these vaccines are on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. So with the vaccine IPV, this is the inactive vaccine, like I said before. It was developed by Jonas Salk and began administration in 1955, and it cost $25 to $50. It has the poliovirus particles that are grown and then killed to be used in the vaccine. They are considered non-infectious and reduces the ineffectivity of poliovirus, but a person does not need many doses for it to be effective. The vaccine OPV, which is the oral vaccine, was created by Albert Sabin and started administration in 1961. It costs about 25 cents per dose. It is superior to the inactive vaccine in administration to mass vaccinations, and it's longer lasting. But as of recently, the type 2 component of the OPV, which I researched, has been removed and switched from the trivalent to bivalent oral polio vaccine. And I've included the link at the bottom if anyone would like to further research that. So with any additional information of interest, something I found that when I was researching polio was post-polio syndrome, or PPS for short. This happens well after polio has ran its course, and PPS will continue to weaken the muscles previously affected by the polio infection, but it is not considered life-threatening. Unfortunately, though, there is little known about the cause of this, and there is very little treatment that can be done for it. So PPS symptoms. There are many symptoms of PPS associated with PPS, and they consist of slow progressive muscle deterioration and weakness, fatigue, joint pain, and bone deformities. On the right is a graph of what % of patients have the specific symptoms associated with PPS. So to end, I have my great uncle Evan Myers was a great man, and he was very well known in the Rexburg area. He lived a great life and was even a bishop here at BYU Idaho for a very long time. He was a respected man with many friends and amazing family. But when he was a kid, growing up, he had polio, and it left his left arm small and weak. He spent a long time in hospitals and hated hospitals after that. He also suffered from PPS later in life. His disability never stopped him, and he was a very hard worker and a great athlete. So with that, just last month, he passed away, and I went to his funeral, and I was able to hear many great stories, including how he overcame the polio virus and how he made the best of a bad situation. This man was an inspiration to learn more about and to study polio and see exactly what he went through and what it did to him and how it affected him. But anyways, so that's the end of our presentation. We had fun researching and becoming more familiar with this disease, and we hope you guys did as well. So with that, I'm going to stop.